The golden halls of Elinder had never felt so cold. Princess Seraphina stood before the ancient throne, her silver hair catching the fading sunlight that streamed through crystal windows. Her father, King Thalion, sat upon the throne with eyes that held neither warmth nor understanding. Beside him stood the ambassadors of the Drakari Empire, their dark armor gleaming like polished obsidian. Lord Malachar of the Drakari stepped forward. His face was handsome in a cruel way, with sharp features and eyes the color of dried blood. He smiled at Seraphina, but there was no kindness in that smile. Only possession, only hunger. "The terms are simple," King Thalion said, his voice echoing through the empty hall. "You will marry Lord Malachar. In exchange, the Drakari will withdraw their armies from our borders. Our people will know peace." Seraphina felt her hands tremble. She had spent 300 years learning to be the perfect princess. She had studied diplomacy, magic, and the ancient arts. She had done everything her kingdom asked of her. But this was too much. This was her entire life being handed to a monster. "Father," she said, keeping her voice steady, "Lord Malachar has burned 17 villages in the eastern provinces. His soldiers have committed crimes that cannot be spoken of in polite company. You would give me to this man?" King Thalion's expression did not change. "I would give you to save 10,000 lives. That is the duty of royalty." Lord Malachar laughed softly. "Your daughter has spirit, King Thalion. I look forward to breaking it." Something snapped inside Seraphina. 300 years of perfect obedience crumbled in a single moment. She looked at her father, at the man who had raised her, and saw only a stranger. She looked at Lord Malachar and saw her future written in his cruel eyes. "No," she said. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. The Drakari ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. King Thalion rose from his throne, his face darkening with anger. "You will do as you are commanded," he said. "I will not." Seraphina raised her chin. "I am a princess of Elinder. I am not livestock to be traded. I refuse this marriage. I refuse this alliance. And I refuse to be silent any longer." Lord Malachar's smile vanished. His eyes burned with cold fury. "Then you choose war, princess. The Drakari Empire does not accept refusal. We will take what we want, and we will leave nothing but ashes behind." He turned and walked from the hall, his ambassadors following like shadows. The great doors slammed shut behind them, and silence filled the golden chamber. King Thalion stared at his daughter. "You have doomed us all." Seraphina met his gaze without flinching. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I have finally done what you were too afraid to do. I have stood against evil." She turned and walked away, leaving her father alone on his throne of gold and regret. The war began 3 days later. Drakari armies poured across the borders like a black tide. They burned forests that had stood for 10,000 years. They destroyed cities that held the memories of entire civilizations. The elves fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. The Drakari had spent centuries preparing for this war. The elves had spent centuries believing peace would last forever. Within 6 months, half the kingdom had fallen. The remaining Elven forces retreated to the capital, preparing for a final stand that everyone knew would end in defeat. King Thalion had died in battle, struck down by Lord Malachar himself. The crown passed to Seraphina, but it felt less like an honor and more like a curse. She stood on the walls of the capital, watching the Drakari armies gather in the distance. Their campfires stretched from horizon to horizon, an ocean of flame that promised destruction. Her generals stood beside her, their faces grim and hopeless. "We have perhaps 3 days," General Aldrich said. "Our walls are strong, but their siege engines are stronger. When they breach the gates, it will be over within hours." Seraphina closed her eyes. She had caused this. Her refusal had started this war. Every death, every destroyed home, every orphaned child. It was all her responsibility. "There must be something we can do," she whispered. Aldrich hesitated. "There is one possibility, Your Majesty, but it is desperate." Perhaps foolish. Tell me. The humans. Serafina opened her eyes. The humans. A strange species that had arrived on their world barely 2 centuries ago. They had appeared in great metal ships that fell from the sky, claiming to be explorers from a distant star. Most elves considered them primitive. They lived short lives, barely a century at most. They had no magic. Their technology was impressive but strange, relying on machines rather than the natural forces that the elder races commanded. The humans had established a small settlement on the western continent, keeping mostly to themselves. They traded occasionally with the other races, but seemed more interested in studying this new world than in participating in its politics. The humans have no army, Serafina said. They are scientists and explorers, not warriors. That is what they have told us, Aldrich replied. But my scouts have reported strange things from their settlement. Massive structures of metal and glass. Vehicles that move without horses or magic. Weapons that shoot light instead of arrows. Perhaps they have hidden their true capabilities. Serafina considered this. It was a desperate hope, but it was the only hope they had left. Send a messenger, she said. Tell the humans that Queen Serafina requests their aid. Offer them whatever they want in return. Land, resources, alliance, anything. The messenger returned 2 days later, just as the Drakari siege began. It came not alone but accompanied by 3 humans in strange gray uniforms. Their leader was a woman with dark skin and close-cropped hair. Her name was Commander Sarah Chun, and she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen many battles. Queen Serafina, Commander Chun said, bowing slightly. We received your message. The United Earth Coalition is prepared to offer assistance. You will help us? Serafina could barely believe it. Why? We have shown your people little kindness. Many of my people consider humans to be lesser beings. Commander Chun smiled slightly. We are aware, but we have learned something in our travels across the stars. Evil must be opposed, regardless of who is threatened by it. We have watched the Drakari Empire for some time. We know what they are, and we know what they will do if they are not stopped. What do you want in return? Nothing. We ask only that you remember this day. Remember that humans stood beside you when all seemed lost. The siege of Elinder had lasted 3 days when the humans arrived in force. The Drakari had breached the outer walls. Their soldiers poured through the gaps, cutting down defenders with brutal efficiency. Lord Malachar himself led the charge, his black sword dripping with elven blood. Victory was within his grasp. Then the sky exploded. Massive ships descended through the clouds, ships that made the Drakari war vessels look like children's toys. They were sleek and silver, bristling with weapons that the elves could not even begin to understand. Lightning fell from their hulls, striking the Drakari siege engines and reducing them to twisted metal in seconds. Ground vehicles followed, rolling across the battlefield on treads of steel. Human soldiers poured from their holds, armed with weapons that screamed instead of sang. Each shot found its mark with impossible precision. Drakari warriors who had seemed invincible moments ago fell by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Lord Malachar screamed orders, trying to rally his forces, but his soldiers had never faced anything like this. They had conquered a dozen worlds with sword and spell. They had never encountered a species that had replaced magic with science, that had turned war itself into mathematics. Commander Chen landed her personal craft near the central plaza, where Serafina fought back-to-back with her remaining guards. The human commander stepped from her vehicle and raised a weapon the size of her forearm. Light erupted from its barrel, cutting through Drakari soldiers like a blade through water. Your Majesty, Chun called out. We need to push them back through the breach. Can your people hold? Serafina nodded, too amazed to speak. She had never seen such devastating power. The humans moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each soldier knowing exactly where to be and what to do. They communicated through devices in their ears, coordinating their attacks with supernatural efficiency. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Drakari army had been shattered. 20,000 soldiers had charged the walls of Elindar. Fewer than 2,000 escaped alive. Lord Malachar was not among them. Seraphina found his body near the eastern gate, killed by a human weapon that had burned a hole clean through his chest. She felt no satisfaction in his death, only exhaustion and relief. Commander Chun approached her as the sun set over the ruined walls. "The Drakari Empire will not forget this defeat," she said. "They will come again, stronger and angrier. But they will also be afraid. They have learned that this world is not unprotected." "How can we ever repay you?" Seraphina asked. "You have saved my people. You have saved everything." Chun smiled. "Of something better. That is all we ask. Build a kingdom where a princess does not have to choose between her freedom and her people's survival. Build alliances with races you once considered beneath you. And remember that sometimes the youngest species has lessons to teach the oldest." Seraphina looked out over the battlefield, at the human soldiers who moved among the wounded, providing aid to elf and human alike. They were strange creatures, these humans. They lived such short lives, yet they accomplished so much. They had no magic, yet they had created power beyond anything the elder races had imagined. Perhaps her people had been wrong about them. Perhaps all the elder races had been wrong about many things. "I will build something better," she promised. "And I will never forget what you have done here today." Commander Chun nodded. "We know you will, Your Majesty. That is why we came. The war between kingdoms did not end that day. There were more battles to fight, more treaties to negotiate, more wounds to heal. But something had changed. The old order where elder races ruled and younger ones bowed had been broken. A new era was beginning, one where humans stood as equals beside elves and dwarves and all the other peoples of this world. And it had all started with a princess who refused to be silent. A princess who had said no to tyranny and yes to hope. A princess who had learned that sometimes courage comes from the most unexpected places. Seraphina ruled for another 700 years, and she never forgot the lesson the humans had taught her. Strength was not measured in years or magic. It was measured in the willingness to stand against evil, even when all seemed lost. Especially when all seemed lost